Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots. Bullers, shills, desolate, serfs, peasants, vassals, enemies of the state. I'm East Affiliate, and today I'd like to talk about J.P. Morgan, Chase, and Jamie Dimon. So, of course, last week, J.P. Morgan Chase announced a surprise and significant mark-to-market losses on credit derivatives in its chief investment office. And following that, the bank said in a regulatory filing that the portfolio at the chief investment office had, quote, proven to be riskier, more volatile, and less effective as an economic hedge than the firm previously believed, unquote. And I love how these guys are kind of the masters of understatement. Jamie Dimon blamed, quote, errors, sloppiness, and bad judgment. And, of course, when he says that, he means other people, not him. And then what else did it? Oh, Jamie Dimon also said the strategy was, quote, flawed, complex, poorly reviewed, poorly executed, and poorly monitored, unquote. And of course, that's a good blueprint for our entire banking industry and all the oversight. It's flawed, complex, poorly reviewed, poorly executed, poorly monitored. So that's the American banking system. So I got to hand it to Jamie Dimon for being so insightful. So anyway, so J.P. Morgan has lost $2 billion so far. And, of course, it's going to be a lot more because Fitch and Moody's are downgrading them. So that's going to make their borrowing costs go up. So this amount will grow. Then, of course, they'll have the legal costs on top of that. And I have a formula that I use whenever I hear government and corporate numbers. I double everything. I have a friend who has a formula. His is to go 10 times anything the government or corporations give you, but I'm a little more modest, so I only go 2 times. In this case, doubling the $2 billion to $4 billion is probably more accurate. And then, of course, they lost 11% of their share value on Friday, and so they're losing another $20 billion in market value. So there goes $25 billion. Some odd dollars in a few days, and of course the amount they lost on this bet was over just the last 6 weeks. And this is a bank that made $90 billion in the last year, so that's a big chunk out of their ass. And but there's some things that are kind of fishy about it. I'm kind of wondering why this is all unfolding this way, because this amount of money is relative small change for J.P. Morgan. I mean, they have $90 billion they took in last year. They're paying their record bonuses again. The chief investment officer has around $380 billion total to play with. And, he's been using that to gamble in the European market. And, they gambled, and they put out a bet designed to look like a hedge, and they got caught with their pants down. Just like MF Global. They were gambling to get out of their untenable position, and the fact that they commingled funds and cooked their books and were overleveraged. They're hoping to get out of it by making some quick money and a Eurozone bet. And that's what J.P. Morgan's doing here, too. And, I think rightly a lot of observers are saying this is a liquidity problem. What this shows is that J.P. Morgan, one of the strongest banks on Wall Street, has a liquidity problem. That's a fancy way of saying they're broke. All the banks are broke. They're broke, and all the banks in Europe are broke. All the banks here are broke. All the banks are broke. So they want to call it, liquidity problems. I just call them broke. There's a mountain of broke banks out there, and this is just an indication of that. Just like MF Global was a canary in the coal mine, so is J.P. Morgan a canary in the coal mine. And here's the reason why, because what this exposes, and this is what people should be talking about, is J.P. Morgan Chase has a derivatives exposure of $70 trillion. Derivatives are all the vehicles that are extensions of their basic banking operations, and they create all these mechanisms called exotic financial instruments that are basically whipped out of thin air, and they're based on complex formulas, and this whole house of cards banking system is based on this smoke and mirrors. So J.P. Morgan has exposure to $70 trillion worth of derivatives worldwide, Citibank has $52 trillion in exposure in derivatives. Bank of America has $50 trillion in exposure, and Goldman Sachs has $44 trillion in exposure in derivatives. Now, the entire world derivatives market is somewhere between $600 trillion and $1.5 quadrillion, which of course is, hundreds of times bigger than all the world economies put together. So that's a lot of exposure, and that's a lot of betting, and that's what these banks do. So JP Morgan bet on the European credit default swaps, and basically the chief chief investment officer, Bruno Ixil, he got himself into a position that he couldn't get himself out of, and the other players out there smelled blood, and they took him down. So that's what's happening here, and this whole thing is playing out kind of strange, though, because here's J.P. Morgan, who bluffed his way through the whole bailout process. He said they were the strongest bank. They didn't want any bailout money. They took bailout money only because they had to. And then it turns out, of course, they got $48 billion in direct emergency loans in 2008 and continue to get loans for the next year. So they hardly were not on the lifeline that all the other banks were. So they were broke then, just like all the rest. They're broke now, just like all the rest. So it doesn't matter that they spent the last 4 years getting all this bailout taxpayer money, getting all these backdoor secret bailouts, getting all this free money from the Fed, zero interest rates, giving them free money, parking their reserves at the Fed and getting free money. Every opportunity they've gotten free money, and after 4 years of nothing but free money hand over fist, they're still broke. They still pay their record bonuses, they still chart up these so-called record profits, but they're all broke. All broke. So, but what's going on here? Are they angling because that grenade that they swallowed, the Washington Mutual Bank, with all its toxic real estate, is that finally stinking up their books enough that they have to take these kind of gambles to make money in Europe? Does it have something to do with the election? Is somebody gunning for Jamie Dimon before the election? Is there some kind of deal worked out with Obama and Jamie Dimon before the election? Are they angling for another bailout? That would be my guess. They're pushing for more QE3. They're angling for another bailout, setting up for another bailout to unload all this toxic real estate that they have from Washington Mutual. The same reason they place these risky bets on the Eurozone. So anyway, I'm only speculating because there's something wrong here. I love seeing Jamie Dimon eat shit. I love seeing J.P. Morgan squirm. But something doesn't seem right here. So I'm not sure why this is getting blown even more out of proportion. Jamie Dimon probably could have kept this all quiet. Easy for them to hide a $2 billion aberration. So if anybody has any ideas, I'd love to hear them down in the comments. But there's my take. For me, this story is about J.P. Morgan taking these huge risks. As we know, the banks have been using all this money to go gamble in the casino known as our markets. So that's one thing it says. Another thing it says is this derivatives exposure out there is still there to haunt us. It helped take things down 4 years ago. It's helping to trash Europe. And it will continue to be weapons of mass destruction in our economic system as long as all these derivatives are out there. And another thing this says is that these banks behave this way because the taxpayers and the government bailed them out, and as long as they keep bailing them out, this will continue to be a problem. So this next time, they better not be bailed out, because this can't go on, certainly not for us. And I guess last but not least, this shows that the entire banking system, like I've said in almost every video I've done about banks and bankers, they're all broke. It's a systemic problem. It's not a credit crunch. It's a liquidity problem. It's an insolvency problem. They're all broke. We have broke banks in Europe propping up broke governments And the broke governments are propping up the broke banks, and they prop each other up. They're both broke. And in the United States, we have broke banks propping up a broke government who are propping up broke banks. They're all broke. They're all broke.